Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today. This is Carl Dreschel. I will be your host. Please note that we cannot hear you as you are muted. If you have questions, I would ask that you use the chat window during the presentation. The presentation will last about 30 minutes, and once complete, we will address any questions sent in during the presentation and have an open Q&A session afterward. Okay, let's get started. The theme of this webinar is how to cure 6 common SharePoint headaches. And with that, let me introduce my colleague, Stephen Bystrand, Senior Vice President of Global Sales and Business Development. Steve?
Sorry about that, folks. I muted myself in 2 places, and it took me a second to realize it. Thanks and welcome to our worldwide audience. Thank you, everyone, for taking some time from your day. And Carl, thanks for the introduction. We're here to go through several key things that a typical SharePoint installation and the administration and management staff supporting that installation go through as they try to support SharePoint in their particular company, environment, organization, government entity, whatever it happens to be. So just a quick rule of thumb, like with all of our webinars, these are intended to be short so you don't take too much time out of your day. As a result of that, we can't possibly cover everything. So I guess I would suggest that you either type a question in your chat window if you don't see what you need to see, or reach out to me directly, or Carl or Juliet, who has been our point person in the organization of this, if you have further questions or would like to see a one-on-one demo where we can kind of go from the beginning. I've kind of looked at the list of people that are attending, and it seems like there's a few of our customers, but a lot of you are new faces, so I don't know if you've had any exposure to GSX Monitor. We're going to jump right in and jump around and look at things very quickly and not necessarily go through this in a logical way to kind of build a foundation, because that might take a little too long. So if you're a little confused but you kind of like the ideas of what you're seeing, I would suggest maybe we do a one-on-one with myself or one of my sales team globally, and we'll get you the answers you need. And, of course, we also have a trial version that you can download and test in your own environment. So with that, let's jump into some of the headaches. So first of all, what we're going to cover today is the 6 common headaches. There may be more, there may be less, depending what your particular situation is, but these are the 6 ones that we've identified. We're going to talk a little bit as we go about 2 products, GSX Monitor and GSX Analyzer. Monitor can be acquired if just the reporting, or rather the alerting and monitoring and alerting part is what you want. If you want SLA reporting and a better way to understand the data, and we would recommend that very heavily, you would also want the Analyzer module. A little bit about our philosophy, we'll talk about that as well. We'll go into a demonstration and some of the benefits of the tool set, rather, the suite, the solutions. We'll talk about who GSX is toward the end of things, and we'll have a Q&A session. So with that, let's talk about some of these headaches. The first headache is you're going to deploy SharePoint, you did some load testing, and then when it gets out into production, it doesn't work the way you anticipated. So load testing stats may not be reliable in this situation because the real world intervenes, and then you need to understand what the performance of the service you're delivering to users is, so you can't ignore that. You keep running out of resources. Everyone knows this about SharePoint. There's a lot of data that gets stuck in there. That's a good thing. It's objective, but sometimes from a technical and an administration standpoint, that can be a real challenge to deal with. So some ways to deal with that, giving you a view of what's changing, how your SQL backend is growing, and making sure you understand future capacity issues. Headache 3, I don't know if all my sites are in sync. So obviously we have all this data that we've talked about. It's why SharePoint's there, to manage large volumes of data. But if you can't find the stuff, and it's not indexed properly, and you don't have good metadata, and you don't have a way to find the data, what did we accomplish? So making sure that the key services underlying that are working so that the data is replicated and copied, indexed properly so it can be accessible. Headache 4. It kind of goes back a little bit to understanding what the user's experience is that we talked a little bit about in one of the previous headaches, but it's getting more specific. So we need to understand how the users are doing various functions. Is it acceptable? Why are they complaining? And making sure that we understand what we have to do to make their experience better. Lack of resources. I'm not talking about servers and RAM and CPU. I'm talking about humans, educated humans. and SharePoint administrators and technical managers are in very short supply. So for your organization to leverage the best benefits out of SharePoint, how can we stretch these resources? How can we give these resources help so that we can maximize our utilization of SharePoint and not have the frustration of looking for full-time equivalents to fulfill our needs. So these administrators are bogged down in day-to-day tasks. How can we give them some help so that they can be spread around and their expertise can be benefiting the enterprise? And then user complaints is a big thing. SharePoint is a little bit less predictable than the typical application. A lot of data is being added. One of the great things about it is that a department or a team can throw up a site and start doing things and utilizing the powerful functionality to help them in a project or for a particular need, but because of that, it can be inconsistent, and a lot of user complaints tend to come with that experience if the user's experience is not adequate. So looking at SharePoint from the outside are some of the things we do, making sure that we understand that user's perspective and pointing those key experts at the most important problems at the most important time, anticipating things before they impact the users. Okay, so we said we'd talk a little bit about our philosophy. I would say that the first and maybe most important thing is GSX Monitor is agentless. So you don't have to install anything on your SharePoint servers. We monitor multiple platforms. We're here to talk about SharePoint today, but we monitor messaging, whether that's Exchange 23, 2003, 2007, 2010. Domino is also one of the platforms we monitor. SharePoint, of course, BlackBerry, some of the other IBM platforms like SameTime, et cetera, are also monitored here. You could pick and choose which ones you want to monitor or just do SharePoint, but in any case, it is entirely agentless. We want to help you manage the performance of your environment, not just as a server up or down, managing the user's experience, et cetera. We've talked about some of these things, so we're just kind of recapping as we go along. Just as a final recap, multi-platform, agentless, no code on servers. Coming along with that is speed to deployment. It's virtually plug and play, virtually no resource consumption on the monitored servers. It's much like one more user, maybe a little busier than the average user, but that's the basic concept, is that we're sitting in a certain location, sitting from the outside, modeling user activity and experience, connecting, doing repetitive tasks just like your users do, and then letting your skilled administrators and technical managers know what's happening rather than waiting for the users to be upset and a problem escalates. Obviously, full integration with SCOM is a key thing in the typical Exchange and SharePoint Microsoft-based shop. We also integrate to other SNMP compliant consoles, whether it's Tivoli or BMC Patrol or HP OpenView or whatever. Okay, so let's jump into the demo. And again, I'm going fast because there's a lot of things to talk about. So very quickly, let's just go back and recap. Headache 1, I can't get realistic load testing results. Hidden underneath that, the hidden meaning is that we did some load testing perhaps, and then now that we're out in the real world, we don't understand what's happening. So let's jump in here, and again, I know from the list of people that a lot of you, I don't recognize your names. So here we have a big enterprise with several hundred servers that are BlackBerry, that are various versions of Exchange, and here we have our SharePoint servers. So there's 3 columns of servers, and these little warning lights are telling me something about the condition of that server. It's a real-time dashboard meant for the administrator and technical manager to see at this moment in time. Ideally, we want to see all green lights is kind of the idea. And in this case, our SharePoint server is up, its access time is very good, and we see other lights for other aspects of that server. So let's dive into one of our servers right now and go into our setup wizard. It's an existing server, so it's not going to take us through step by step, but if you were creating a new server entry, it would take you through each of these pages so you could fill out the various settings so that your monitoring with GSX Monitor of that particular type of server is maximized and your utilization of the tool is maximized. We're going to jump around, so I'm not necessarily going to go through this in a logical way because we sort of assume that you've seen GSX Monitor before, and I suspect that that is not true, so I'm going to ask that you contact me. But what it's doing, again, it's sitting here agentless on either a workstation or a server class machine and doing various probes. So like like on the scanning thing, I can say how often do I want to scan this server, and I can increment this up or down, and it's going to continue to check every 7 minutes from now till the end of time, 24/7, holiday, Christmas, Diwali, Yom Kippur. I don't care what holidays you celebrate. It's going to be doing it 24/7. Now, what I came here to do was talk about web services, because we're talking about load testing and understanding latency. So we're going to stay kind of specifically targeted on that right now. And there are various web services that we can monitor here with GSX Monitor. In fact, there's a description of what each of these are if you don't know what it is. But some key ones that we might want to pick are various ones that allow us to access data, but you can pick, again, whichever one you want, and then the individual latency alert, depending on what I pick, can be set for you here. So if I enable site data, I can set not only to monitor that and alert if it's not working, but it's also going to allow me to monitor it against a particular access time threshold, and that's going to proactively notify you if something's not working properly. To show you what the outcome of that looks like, let me go in here to my SharePoint statistics, and let's go to that same server. And up here I see that the particular web services I've been monitoring, what is the most recent value that I've returned of the access time, that is. So this is showing me this constantly. You as an administrator can come here and look at it. Obviously, we already said that if it falls, not below, if it goes above, rather, a threshold, so that it's taking too long by whatever value you've set, it's going to proactively alert the right resource. But if you want to know at any point in time what's happening, you can see what that is on each one of your servers to make sure that that data is accessible, that's sitting out there on that server. In addition to that, to understand the load and the latency of things, we have several different areas where we can work. We have scenarios where very quickly we can set up multiple different SharePoint scenarios. So uploading a document, a test document, I'm going to do that every 1 hour. You can set the cycle for this type of probe to be whatever you want, or on certain days even, and various start times. And then GSX Monitor is going to automatically attempt to do that. In this case, I only have one of these tuned, but I might have multiple document uploads from every one of my servers where I can create that probe to run on a cyclical basis. And GSX Monitor is going to indeed do that, and then not only confirm what it's happening, but it's going to check against a particular threshold and alert you if we're not meeting that threshold. You can set this threshold to be whatever you want. And again, you can set up various probes like creating a site, adding a blog post, uploading a document, creating a meeting, utilizing the search service, etc. We'll go through these probably a couple times for our various headaches today, so we'll touch on this a couple times. Another quick point that I might bring up is performance. So the performance of various SharePoint sites. And let's see if I have one where I've actually been doing some probing and I've got some decent data. I don't have any data here. Okay, well, what's going to be happening here, I should have checked this before the demo, GSX Monitor is going to go whatever site we've done, and you're going to actually see something that looks like a heartbeat here. We'll go to one of our graphs tabs and look at SharePoint access time. And one of the difficulties about demoing a tool like this is that you have to have real data for it to work. So you get the same thing with sites. It's a different metric that we're looking for, SharePoint access time to a particular server, and we're seeing how that access time varies over time. This is to the server itself. On the performance tab where we're looking at SharePoint sites, had we had a probe that was actually up and running, we'd literally see not only the setup section in the top of the probe, but we'd see how that site content is returning to GSX Monitor as if we were a user, literally no different than any other user, to return that data. And then we'd see crazy things like these monstrous spikes and wonder, well, what's happening? Let's pretend there's a pattern here. Every day at 3 p.m. we see a huge, huge spike like this. That helps us understand not only is our load testing data that is in a static sort of set of conditions X, but what happens over time as other conditions are changing, because as we all know, your environment is constantly changing and continuously variable. So load testing that occurs at this moment might make things look great. At this moment might look them very dismal, but we see that it's not consistent, and that's a very important piece of the concept of load testing. Again, we're kind of going quick, so let's jump back into another one of the scenarios and talk about, I keep running out of resources. Okay, so this is a very common concern that SharePoint administrators have. So let's talk about that we have a particular SharePoint server, this one right here, and I'm running out of things, or I'm concerned about that. So first of all, let's start with the concept of how are we gathering some of the data we're about to show you. And I can go into my SQL settings, and we can address the particular SQL database or mirror or aliases that we're accessing data on with this particular front-end server. So we're doing that on an ongoing basis. Let's jump over into stats where we just were a minute ago and look at SharePoint stats, and we'll go to that same server. So now here I have some resource information about the number of site collections, the overall storage, the amount of RAM and CPU utilized. Of course, we had the latency of the various web services, which we saw before. But now let's get into the content side of things. How many content databases are on that server? How many site collections are on each one of those? What's the overall storage, the number of docs, and the size of the docs in megabytes? And then we can move into the site collections and look at individual site collections if I want to toggle between these, and I can see the various site collections in a particular content database, their size, etc. And I can also export any of this stuff off to Excel. So this gives us a very accurate way of understanding what's out there, how is my data changing and growing. And then, of course, we also have a disk storage in our SharePoint. Here we go, disk storage threshold, where I can look at overall disk space. And then ultimately, we can go to our other tool, GSX Analyzer, and look at the growth of disk over time. Now, I happen to have kind of lousy data here, but GSX Analyzer is taking the data from GSX Monitor, and I don't have continuous data because my demo system I don't really run all the time. But in your real world, you'd see, in this case, I'm looking at disks free, total disk used, et cetera, and various metrics simultaneously over, I don't know if that's, say, 30 days, and I only have a small amount of data here because, again, I'm not collecting it every day. You would normally run GSX Monitor 24/7 and do this continuously. And then the dotted lines are my capacity prediction for the future. So you can not only look at what's happened historically, like we see here, you can project this into the future. Obviously, you have to use some logical, statistical thought where you probably wouldn't take 5 or 6 days of data that's not continuous and predict a month out into the future. You might take 12 months to project 4 months, but the concept I think you'll understand is right there. So Analyzer has this way of looking at my SharePoint servers. In this case, I have a availability pie chart, some KPIs, some individual statistics for my various SharePoint servers for the particular time period I've asked for, and some of these other tabs give me various other information. We were just on the Trend Report tab where we were looking at data over time. In this case, it's days, but it could be months. Again, I know we haven't covered everything in great clarity. The basic principle is GSX Monitor is doing probing and constant data collection as well as near-term alerting when something's wrong, dumping that data at the end of the day into Analyzer so you can look for trends over time. And the concept of resource utilization, whether it be RAM utilization or disk utilization over time, it has that concept of time. It's not just at this moment. I have 1,000 megabytes today. Is that good or bad? I don't know. If I had 0 2 days ago and it's growing very, very quickly and we can project that into the future, maybe that is a problem. But any metric in a vacuum has no value of goodness or badness. So you have to look at over time, and that's the concept of Analyzer, being able to look at things as they grow and change. Okay, headache 3. I don't know if all my sites are in sync. Okay, so we've talked about this as that there's a lot of data in SharePoint. That's the intent, that we can collect all of our data in a way that others can collaborate and utilize that data extensively within our enterprise, and it's not just in one particular silo. That obviously has storage implications, but it also has search and indexing implications. So if I can't get to the data, it really doesn't matter a heck of a lot if I have it somewhere, if I can't find it when I need it. So we're going to talk about the concept of indexing and data access. And let's go back into my main view, and we'll go back to that one server we were using. And I just like the way the wizard looks a little better. So I'm going to jump in here, and here's all my choices. Okay, and I'm going to go to indexer alerts right now, and in GSX Monitor I can set up a probe that says if a certain amount of elapsed time has gone on since my last successful indexer crawl, and you can tune this to be more or less, so you can, as with every aspect of GSX Monitor, you can tune the sensitivity up or down as is appropriate, okay? And here we can set the value that we want to make sure we've had a successful crawl. Additionally, there's going to always be some unsuccessful crawl elements. So what is the threshold of the percentage of unsuccessful elements, or the amount of unsuccessful elements, rather, before I decide that there's a problem? So if some amount of elements are not going to be crawled at any given time, if we had a 0, we'd be getting alerted all the time, and it would drive us crazy. So where is the number that we're willing to accept before it becomes problematic? And you can tune that up or down to reflect the sensitivity thoughts that you have. Additionally, we talked about web services before, but some of these web services are rather critical. So here, like the site data web service is very important, so that metadata can be utilized to find the particular content that you're looking for. Alerts is necessary to make sure that lists, SharePoint libraries, etc., are current, so that we can actually find the data that we want. Versions is important if we want to be able to find not only the current version or the most recent, freshest version of this particular content, whatever it is, but to see prior versions. So maybe we made changes and we needed to go back, we deleted something, we want to go back to a prior incarnation of it to find the content we want. And if a web service is not working adequately, we're not going to be able to do that. Obviously, we're not probing all these as demo data, but if I turn it on, not only do I confirm that the web service is working, but I can also turn on a threshold so that if a latency to that web service responding exceeds some value, that we're going to alert the appropriate resource to make sure that they understand that. And obviously, the search service has to be working, et cetera, for people to be able to get to the content that they want to see. Okay, let's go back and look at the next set. I can't measure the user experience. SharePoint is an intensely user-oriented application. There's always users on the end of an application, but the more varied and perhaps chaotic the kind of interactions that the users might have with this data set are, the less consistent our results are going to be. So what I mean by that is if you have an application that has a finite set of ways of interacting with the data, it's pretty much just going to vary over time, and there aren't as many variables and ways to access that data. And SharePoint, it's one of its powers is that you can get to the data in many ways and interact with data in many, many ways, so that user experience becomes much harder to understand than it is with a typical application like, let's say, email. I mean, mail delivery time and success A and delivery time latency are the measures of the user experience. But with SharePoint, there's many, many other ways to look at this. So let's jump in and talk about some of the things. We've touched sort of on some of these a moment ago. And we looked at performance, and I didn't have any data, if you'll recall, so we went over to another tab to show you what that graph would look like, and I hope you remember. But again, what we're doing here is we're accessing particular site data that you define, and you can set, we only have 4 set up here, but you could have many, and then we're going to graph that over time. These blue lines are days. Obviously, I'm not running the probe because it's in a demo environment, but we would get that heartbeat sort of EKG graph as I showed you a few minutes ago, where we see the change in time, and you can start to look for ramping up over time as we see that our user experience is suffering because the access time is growing as time goes by for this particular database. It may be it's time for some good hygiene and a reboot of that server or something, or maybe we need more resources if that's growing over a longer period. Here we only have 4 or 5 days. Depending on your scan cycle, you might have 2 or 3 weeks of data at a very high level of recency and detail, scan by scan. That's going to be contrasted with GSX Analyzer, where we're going to look at data over longer periods of time. In this case, it's a month. We might have probes here over 12 months or 18 months and see the growth and change in data. Again, going back to the user's experience, though, we're looking at this change for every one of these sites that we've asked for. We have the data before us, and then we can also implement an access time threshold, and 180 seconds is kind of silly, that's rather long, that we've just put in there for our in my demo environment. But we put a value in here that is the upper end of the normal range that a user can accept and still do their job for this particular content. And if we exceed that, even if we're successful, GSX Monitor is going to alert the appropriate resource that this is not acceptable so that they can take some preemptive action. The site's not down necessarily. A site isn't inaccessible. However, it's getting to the point where the users are not going to be able to do their job effectively. Similar concept is for the SharePoint scenarios, but again, it's more varied where we have multiple ways we can set up of interacting with the data. So in this case, I'm going to create a site every hour or every, 15 minutes, and I might have multiple of these probes. I only have one in this example. And again, we're going to do that cyclically. We're going to make sure that A can succeed and B can succeed within an access threshold timeline. And if it doesn't, we're going to alert the appropriate resource that it's not working for each of these different types, and again, multiple ones in each of those if you want to have multiple upload a document tests against various servers, etc., to make sure that it's working everywhere in your environment, not just in the one testing avenue. Moving back to GSX Analyzer, we talked about the overview, which is a snapshot in time for the day, week, or month that we're looking at. And again, I'm looking at SharePoint data and all these various metrics for my various servers. I have 15 days or weeks or months of availability. We can look at individual change in many, many of these statistics, and you'll see that there's all these statistics being gathered by GSX Monitor incrementally. And then the Environmental Health tab is allowing me to compare multiple servers at the particular time period that I've looked for. So in this case, I've got a SharePoint profile where I've said that I have various data that I like to see. And in this case, we've got server uptime. We see the number of documents. We see the total number of documents, size. We see the total number of content databases, the total number of sites, and on. And you can set up all of your SharePoint servers with this type of data that you can look at any given point and compare them to see how they're changing and if we've got good balance of documents, sites, and storage across all of our various servers. I don't have one of these set up, but I can establish that a particular metric is the SLA that defines is the user experience being met, and then again compare the servers across those. I can have either KPIs with the green bars or the purple ones as we see here with data. I haven't set this up with a KPI, but you can actually, or either SLA or KPI, but you can define which metric we have is the definition of the SLA, which ones are the key KPIs, and which ones are additional data. And GSX will show this to you at any given moment, so you can not only manage your user experience for a particular task like we did here with a particular type of transaction that they do, but we can do it more globally across all of our servers to see are we performing in general and where is the one in the outliers that need to have the most attention applied to them as quickly as possible. Okay, we're on to SharePoint Headache number 5, and we've got to hit the gas here because we're going to be eating into our Q&A time, so my apologies for that. My SharePoint experts are tied up. Administrators are bogged down by routine tasks, and they can't do proactive things that they want to do on a ongoing basis. So as we said before, these kinds of resources, if you are a SharePoint expert, consider yourself lucky. You're in high demand. So GSX Monitor, how can a tool help you? So rather than doing a firefight dealing with users, the idea here is that GSX is going to be monitoring your SharePoint servers or your Exchange servers or whatever type of platform you have. And you can go here anytime and see I'm green, I got all green lights, I'm happy, and I don't have to go do any kind of probes or look things up because I've tuned GSX Monitor to watch things for me. Okay, so I know that the server's up and all the associated web services that we've set are up. If this light, the up light is up, I know that I'm not seeing errors in my SharePoint log files. You tune the list of log errors you want to look for. In this case, obviously, I am seeing errors because it's red. And then, is my SQL database accessible and can I connect to it? Okay, so if I go into one of these particular servers, This is where I can set these up whether I utilize the wizard or not, the indexer alerts, etc. I can look at SharePoint disk space, and again, I'm confident that GSX Monitor is doing this because I've tuned it to look for changes in my disk space. That if I go above certain things, I'm looking at performance, just like we've talked about before for SharePoint performance, and I'm being notified if it's not working, right? I'm looking at my scenarios. I can go look at environmental health like we just were at to compare and look for the servers where my attention should be directed right now. I'm able to do that on an ongoing basis. GSX is doing this for me, and I don't have to go be doing these various searches or be caught by surprise when the users are complaining. Number 6. I can't understand why my users are complaining. I don't understand what's happening. Well, obviously, the first part of that is understanding and measuring the user experience. We didn't really talk about this, but I kept alluding to this concept of alerting. So GSX is every hour, or here it is, every 10 minutes scanning for this site, every 9 minutes scanning this particular site and calling for the content. This is just one example. All the different probes, if there's a web service not working or not working within its latency threshold, the same concept is that I can alert the appropriate resource. So alert if this site is unavailable. It says default. Well, it's not a default alert. It's really a default profile. We didn't talk about this at all previously, but GSX Monitor has all these different choices of alert, and the default profile is we're sending an alert to maybe a distribution list or a common mail address, or let's say I want to add a distribution list here. So now I'm sending something to gmonitor@gsx.net and to a list of all the admins for the SharePoint sites. I'm sending an SNMP trap to SCOM. I'm sending SMS text to certain devices, or we only have one in this example here, but to s2ro@gsx.net. I'm going to play a pop-up message. I'm going to play a sound. I'm going to send an SNMP trap to any of the available consoles. I'm going to use a GSM modem to get word out if that server room is cut off. So all these different types of alerts are things we can do to notify those SharePoint resources that are going to be able to do something about it, whether it's something that's down, something that's outside of threshold, something that's trending in the wrong direction, or a site or piece of content that is not available, or a scenario that is failing or taking longer than the threshold allows it to. Additionally, I can have a scheduler where I can point this at different people at different on-call hours. I won't go through each of these screens, so we can leave some time for Q&A. Carl, I'll be in 2 minutes or so I'm going to queue up some questions. And if you haven't sent your questions in, look in the chat window in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. There should be a window where you can send your question into Carl, and he'll triage those and serve them up, and we'll go from there. Okay, so again, I can have reminders, I can have escalation. This is the concept of alerting, where GSX Monitor is letting you know what's happening and giving us our various ways to understand what our users are talking about. Inside those alerts, it's going to tell you what the failure is, what the threshold that's been violated is, so you're not confused when a user calls and gives you a story, and what it really means is that our access time is too high. GSX is going to do that and give it to you in an unemotional speak, and you're able to understand that more clearly. So let's go back real quickly to our GSX Monitor's core benefits: optimizing your resources, understanding what the user's experience is, and aligning those two so that business needs are met. Who we are: we've been around since '96. We're headquartered in Switzerland. We have offices in the U.S., UK, and France, obviously Switzerland as well. We're specializing in various collaboration environments. We've concentrated on SharePoint here today, and we're going to queue up the Q&A right now. Carl, if you've got a couple questions, folks. Again, we didn't cover everything, and we went very, very quickly. This was a very broad topic. Some of it might have actually been repetitive because some of the way we deal with some of the same things or some of the different questions are similar. But I would invite you to request a one-on-one session and or do a download so you can kind of see how this works in more entirety in a little bit slower way. Carl, you got any questions for me?
Yes, Steve. The first question is, what impact does Monitor have on the servers being monitored?
Okay, well, as I think I said in the beginning of the session, it's agentless. So I can't say none because that's not scrupulously accurate, but it's very minimal. No code set, no agents have to be installed. You don't have to go through any of that work. You don't have to deal with it every time there's an upgrade, and its footprint is virtually nil. If you've got an environment where you've got 2,000 SharePoint users, now you have 2,001. Would probably be my best way of putting it. Maybe a little busier than the average person, so maybe that's not quite accurate. Maybe it's 2005, but it's really only one more user, and that's sort of the order of magnitude of the impact. Give me another one, Carl.
Is the monitor station available remotely?
Yeah. Okay. So back here where we were, GSX Monitor, this main view that we had that has a lot of servers, so we're really just concentrating on these few. Let's say this was your environment, and you were monitoring BlackBerry and Exchange and SharePoint and other platforms globally from one GSX Monitor installation, and you can absolutely do this. I don't know if we've got 180 servers here, maybe something like that. But you only care about the SharePoint one, so you don't want to see all this other stuff. You only want to see these 4 servers right here because that's all you're responsible for. There's a web view of this data that is profile driven so that you could be presented only with those servers and see that data, or any subset for that matter. You know, maybe somebody's in charge of BlackBerry, they're only going to see these. You're only going to see those. Maybe you only want to see the SharePoint servers in EMEA, because that's what you're responsible for. We can present that data to you in that way. There's also get it on your smartphone so you can get a summary of what you're, obviously this would be hard to read the little dots on a normal interface on a smartphone, so the interface is a little different where it's summarized, and then you can see the places only where there's a problem. Got any more questions, Carl?
Next question, Steve, was is it possible to monitor servers in different data centers?
Well, I think I may have kind of answered that by inference here. If you can access the servers in any location from a particular ID that the test user, the GSX Monitor, is, then absolutely. So I don't, like right now, I'm monitoring servers in Beijing, Manila, Bangkok. These aren't SharePoint servers, but you get that. Mexico City, London, Paris, Frankfurt, Buenos Aires. If you can connect from a location, you can monitor it.
Okay, next question is regarding the indexer. Is it possible to monitor an indexer that's not on a front-end server?
The indexer, wherever that indexer task is running, should be monitored. So if you identify that as a SharePoint server that you want to monitor, then you absolutely can do that. It doesn't have to be serving users.
Okay, next question, Steve, is the tool friendly enough that the help desk, a help desk employee could use it?
Well, as I mentioned, that there is a web view of servers. A lot of times that's one of the reasons that's used, so that the help desk can see the lights. They're the ones that are going to be taking the call from the users. And if they, mouse over a light, they're going to see exactly what's happening and why. So disseminating that information to different audiences is really one of the core benefits of GSX Monitor. It's not only that the initiated and the people that really, really understand all the details can get it. It's not just help desk. It could be the owner of a particular service. He or she wants to know if their users are being impacted, and they want to see those lights, ideally green lights, so that they know all is good. So you absolutely can serve this information to different audiences, and they can understand what's happening pretty easily. Tuning all the latency things, you probably would not want the help desk to have access to that. So, the web interface is actually read-only for that very purpose, because it is normal that the help desk is one of the audiences that consumes the information. Got time for a couple more, Carl, so give me another one.
Okay, the next question is regarding licensing. How are the two products licensed? I think they mean GSX Monitor and GSX Analyzer.
Okay, so pretty much just like all Microsoft products, there's server licenses and user cals. So GSX Monitor and Analyzer are monitored with two variables in mind. One is the number of servers in the environment that you want to monitor, and then the second is the number of users in that environment. So if you had 5 SharePoint servers and 2,000 users, you'd have to buy 5 server licenses for Monitor, 5 server licenses for Analyzer. Actually, 200 user cals are included with each server, so 1,000 would be included. So you'd have to buy an extra 1,000 user cals so that the environment is fully covered. And it's like that for every one of our platforms. So.
Last question, Steve, is about installation. What's required for installation and configuration? I guess how involved is it?
Are they talking about technically what you can run on? Okay, well, let's try to cover them both. I'm actually running what we've seen here today, which I told you I'm not literally running all day, every day, on a laptop. And it can actually run on a workstation class machine. It can be configured to run as a service. I doubt many of our customers do that other than for testing initially when they're playing around with it, because it really needs to be running 24/7, and you probably want to put it in a server room where somebody's responsible for making sure the darn thing's turned on and it's powered up and it's running on an ongoing basis. So it's going to be installed probably on a VM slice somewhere and run 24/7 and alert the appropriate resources with those alert methodologies we showed you about when we talked about understanding the user's complaints. I think was the headache we were talking about. So that's where it runs. It's going to be installed on a VM slice. Installation probably takes an hour. The longest part is probably the download, because it's a pretty decent-sized data set that has to be downloaded when you grab it from our website. Depending on how many servers you have in your environment is going to change how long it takes to configure and run. Realistically, even a very large environment, you're probably going to be up and running in no more than a day and doing at least basic monitoring. If you have several different platforms, obviously there's more things to tune. The intention with the wizards was to take you through each server entry and present you with the things you have to think about so that you're utilizing all the features. There's also templates where you can create, vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry types of servers, and then add new ones that fit into each of those so they can be added almost instantly. So it's not a heavy, big IT project thing where you buy the product and 3 months later you start using it after, a huge consulting gig to get it up and running. I mean, it can be running very, very quickly. I would say in a day is probably not an unfair phrase to use, probably much less for some small environments, and going from there as you get larger. But, it's a matter of days, let's put it that way. Got any more, Carl? Time is up, but let's just grab one more if you got any more questions.
Okay.
And again,
last
folks,
question.
while Carl's looking that up, just thanks again for your time. It's hard to cover a lot in 45 minutes, so I'm going to invite you to contact Juliet here. There's a free trial on our website. There's also some buttons to contact technical services or the sales teams to do a one-on-one. If you want to do a WebEx where we do a one-on-one, it take a couple hours to go through your particular situation. That probably would be recommended, and then follow that up with running some testing on your own environment with a downloaded version. But anyway, last question, Carl.
The last question was, what are all the platforms that can be monitored with the tool?
Okay, well, that's a great question. So we started out doing messaging in '96. We started out doing messaging. So the messaging platforms that can be monitored are the 2003, 2007, and 2010 versions of Exchange, including DAG as an entity, and the CAS array as a unique entity, not just individual servers, but servers that work together to fulfill various functions of those server roles. Okay. Also for mail, we do Domino, and then extending beyond mail, mobility. We do BlackBerry currently, and IBM Traveler for those that are in the Domino space could use Traveler for iOS and Android devices. Incidentally, we are looking and developing an offering for good technology to monitor that as well. Additionally, we didn't talk much about Exchange here today, but ActiveSync is one of the CAS connection protocols, so that we are already monitoring that today, which of course that has to be supported to do any mobility platform with Exchange, so that's an important piece of that. Collaboration would be SharePoint in the Microsoft space. In the Domino space, there's another tool that does some of the same things called Quicker. There's a platform called SameTime that's for online chat and meeting creation. Actually, Link is another platform we're looking at adding later in the year as well. I think I've covered everything. Have I skipped anything, Carl? I forgot what I was talking about as I got along.
Aside from, we also do URL scanning.
Okay, yeah. And then LDAP ports to do a test of Active Directory too. So, again, folks, thank you for your attention. I'm sorry for the rapidity at which I threw out this content, trying to get out a lot of data for you and a lot of information quickly. But after the headaches made it hard to kind of build a foundation of how the tool works. So if you're scratching your head a little bit about how we accomplish some of these things, contact Juliet. Let's set up a one-on-one with myself or with one of my team, and we'll take our time and go through things a step at a time and help you understand, see if this is something good for you. If it is, great. You do a trial and see if it really, really is. Pound away with your colleagues. If it's not, I guess not. So thanks for your time, and join us for another webinar down the road.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your attendance. I'll be sending out or actually, once you finish up the webinar, there will be a brief evaluation. If you could just take a couple minutes to fill that out, we'd appreciate it. Other than that, have a nice day. And as Steve said, if you have any questions, feel free to contact us, and we can take a look at things a little further for you. Thank you.